They say isolation drives men mad. That solitude is a slow poison that seeps into the mind, distorting reality until you can no longer tell where the world ends and your nightmares begin. I never believed those stories, not until I read the final log entries of Thomas Crane, the last lighthouse keeper of Beacon Rock. The lighthouse sits on a jagged outcrop 30 miles off the coast of Maine. For 147 years, it warned ships away from the treacherous rocks below, and for 147 years, men stationed there reported things. Strange things that the Coast Guard dismissed as cabin fever, hallucinations, the tricks of isolation. Thomas Crane was different. He was a rational man, a former naval officer with 20 years of service. He volunteered for the posting, seeking peace after the chaos of war. He lasted exactly 93 days. This is his story, his final story. Day 1, October 14th. Thomas's first entry was optimistic. The supply boat had dropped him off that morning with 3 months of provisions. The lighthouse was automated now, requiring minimal maintenance. His job was simple: monitor the equipment, report any malfunctions, and maintain the structure. The isolation didn't bother him. In fact, he welcomed it. He spent his first evening exploring the keeper's quarters. Previous occupants had left behind books, playing cards, even an old radio that barely picked up static. In the storage room, he found something peculiar. Journals, dozens of them, dating back decades, all incomplete. The entries would start normally enough. Weather reports, maintenance logs, personal reflections, but they all ended abruptly, mid-sentence, as if the writers had simply stopped existing. Thomas found this curious, but not alarming. Perhaps they'd simply taken their journals with them when they left. Perhaps the ones left behind were discarded drafts, abandoned thoughts. He was wrong. Day 7, October 20th. The first week passed without incident. Thomas fell into a routine. Morning inspections, afternoon reading, evening radio checks with the mainland. The weather had been mild, the sea calm. At night, he'd stand on the gallery deck, watching the beam of light cut through the darkness and feel a profound sense of purpose. But on the 7th night, something changed. He woke at 3:17 a.m. to the sound of footsteps on the spiral staircase, heavy, deliberate footsteps climbing toward his quarters. He called out, thinking perhaps the supply boat had arrived early, though he knew that was impossible in the middle of the night. The footsteps stopped. He searched the entire lighthouse, every room, every corner. He was alone. He had to be alone. Imo, the supply boat wouldn't return for another 86 days. He convinced himself it was the old structure settling, the metal expanding and contracting with temperature changes. But deep down, he knew the sound of footsteps when he heard them. Day 23, November 5th. Thomas's entries became shorter, more fragmented. He was sleeping poorly. The footsteps had become a nightly occurrence, always at 3:17 a.m., always climbing the stairs. But now there was something else. Scratching. It came from the walls, from beneath the floorboards, from inside the very stones of the lighthouse itself. A desperate, clawing sound, as if something was trying to get out or in. He radioed the mainland, requesting early extraction. The dispatcher asked if he was experiencing a medical emergency. Thomas said no. The dispatcher said the boat would come on schedule. 93 days, not a day sooner. That was the contract. That was the rule. Thomas began reading the abandoned journals more carefully. He found patterns. Every keeper reported the footsteps. Every keeper heard the scratching. And every keeper mentioned the same thing in their final entries. The light must never go out. They never explained why. They just wrote it, over and over, as if trying to convince themselves or warn whoever came next. Day 45, November 27th. Thomas stopped maintaining the lighthouse. His entries became frantic scrawls, barely legible. He wrote about seeing shadows moving in the water, massive shapes circling the rocks, too large to be whales, too deliberate to be natural. He wrote about the scratching growing louder, more insistent. It was coming from the lamp room now, from behind the great Fresnel lens itself. He could hear it even over the sound of the rotating mechanism, even over the howling wind. And he wrote about the door. There was a door in the lamp room that had never been there before. A small iron door set into the stone wall, covered in rust and corrosion. He'd inspected that room dozens of times during his first week. There had been no door, but now there was. and it was open. Day 89, January 11th. Thomas's final entries were not written in his hand. The writing was different, older, shakier, as if someone else had taken over his journal, or something else. The entries spoke of the others, Jatsa. The keepers who had come before, the ones who had heard the footsteps, who had heard the scratching, who had opened the door. They never left Beacon Rock. They were still there, in the walls, in the stones, in the darkness between the light's rotations, waiting, watching, scratching to get out, and Thomas had joined them. Day 93, January 15th. The final entry was a single sentence, written in 3 different hands, as if passed from one keeper to the next across decades. The light must never go out, because they can only move in the dark. When the supply boat arrived on schedule, they found the lighthouse in perfect working order. The equipment was maintained, the logs were up to date, the quarters were clean. Thomas Crane was gone. His journal was on the desk, still open to the final page. The pen was still in his hand, but Thomas Crane was gone. The Coast Guard decommissioned Beacon Rock Lighthouse 3 months later. They said it was due to budget cuts, that modern GPS made lighthouses obsolete. But those who read Thomas's journal knew the truth. They knew why the light must never go out, and they knew what happens when it does. Beacon Rock Lighthouse still stands today, dark and abandoned, 30 miles off the coast of Maine. On quiet nights, when the fog rolls in thick and the sea is still, fishermen report seeing a light flickering in that old tower. Not the steady beam of a lighthouse, but something else. Something that moves erratically, desperately, as if trying to warn ships away. Or perhaps trying to escape.